This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice. It is not intended to cause or induce breach of an existing agency agreement.
Hello? 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 This is the Vancouver
Commercial
Real Estate Podcast.
And welcome back to the Vancouver Commercial Real Estate Podcast. I'm Cory Wright. I have no co-host today with me. We've actually moved our recording day for what we would call maybe in the brokerage industry in New York City, a legend. We have Bob Knakal on the show today. So anyone who follows social media or follows commercial real estate down south, especially in New York City, Bob Knakal has about 40 years in the business, built a massive commercial real estate firm, and then sold it to one of the bigger box brokerages down there. And now he's currently with JLL, heads up their global capital markets team. Before that, he spent some time at CB, it sounds like. So we're so excited to have Bob Knakal on the show today, with New York kind of being like an epicenter for commercial real estate here in North America and also the world. We're very interested to hear, what does the office market look like? What are the vacancy rates? I also get in and I also ask him, what type of lease rates are people paying? I think a lot of people will be very surprised to hear what lease rates look like for prime New York retail. And also he touches base on Chanel, which obviously purchased their space, which they refer to as a retail condo. Us up here, we refer to them as retail strata-lots, for lack of better words. It's staggering how much per foot they paid. So it's a tremendous, tremendous opportunity. We're thrilled to have Bob on the show. We've been trying to get him on for a long, long time. We got the opportunity to have him today. We've had to move our podcast recording date. So Matt and Adam are probably pretending that they're busy. They probably just didn't want to hang out. So it's just me today, but we're thrilled to have Bob. So without further ado, let's get to our interview today with Bob Knakal of JLL, head of the global capital markets team. Enjoy. This podcast is presented by Impact Commercial.
Impact Commercial, John, Alan, the team over there are fantastic. They've all been on the show.
They have, yeah.
Friends of the show.
Great guys.
Wealth of experience. They can help with all your commercial financing needs.
Whether it's owner-occupiers, land development funds, commercial investments, or multifamily, these guys got you covered.
And they recently obtained their CMHC correspondent lender status.
So for all your commercial lending needs, visit them at impactcommercial.ca.
That's impactcommercial.ca.
All right, we're here today with Bob Knakal, head of JLL's private capital group in New York City. Bob, we're thrilled to have you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Great to be with you, Cory. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
Well, Bob, I'm very excited to have you. As I said before we hit record here, we've been following you on social media, and you've just done a tremendous amount of business, and obviously in commercial real estate. New York always feels like kind of like the epicenter of commercial real estate in North America. Bob, before we get into that, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you became what we'll call, I'm going to use the word legend, in the commercial real estate brokerage industry down there in New York?
Well, thanks. Yeah, it got here one deal at a time. How about that?
That's good.
I've
good
been
way to start.
doing it for 40 years. I started in the business, got into real estate completely by accident. I wanted to be an investment banker. I was a freshman at the Wharton School and wanted to work on Wall Street like every other Wharton kid, but could only get a summer job that looked good. That I only could get a summer job that was in real estate because the investment banks weren't hiring. I walked into a Coldwell Banker office thinking it was a bank. And sure enough, they offered me a job, took it, loved it, went back my next 2 summers, started with Coldwell Banker in New York when I got out of school. And, the rest is history, so they say. But I met my business partner, Paul Massey, there at CB. We were there for 4 years, started our own firm in November of 1988. Started with just the 2 of us and a secretary. By 2014, we had 250 people in 3 offices. according to CoStar, over that period from 2001 to 2014, the number two firm in New York in terms of building sales had done about 1,300 deals. We did over 4,000. So
Wow.
we lapped the field by more than 3 times. We had a culture that revolved around empowering people, servant leadership, training, very, very intensive training. And we sold the business in 2014 to Cushman & Wakefield for $100 million. I was at Cushman for 3.5 years. I've been at JLL for 5 years now. And probably one of the legacy things that I'm most proud of is that today in the New York City investment sales world, there are 29 companies or divisions of companies that are either owned by or run by people who learn the business at Massey Knakal. So it's
Unbelievable.
been quite a legacy in New York. And so that's, and I'm here just, every day making cold calls and trying to sell buildings just like I did 40 years ago.
So what does that tell you when one of the kings of the real estate realm with a history such as yours is still making those calls and still shows up every day? If that doesn't teach the next generation of what it takes to be successful, nothing will.
Yeah, I always say it that real estate brokerage from a building sales perspective is a very simple business. It's just very hard. There's a lot of very mundane, fundamental things that have to be done, but having the discipline to do them is what really makes the difference. And you have to do them day after day and week after week and month after month and year after year. And then, good things will happen if you keep disciplined and keep doing the right things.
No kidding. No kidding. That's a story that, like I said, the next generation needs to listen to, because like I said, when the people in the higher echelons of companies and industries are still getting up every day, doing the same thing that they did 40 years ago and leading by example, shows the next generation what it takes, especially in this industry, to pull itself together. I'm excited to get in it with you, Akira, because obviously, like I said at the start, New York City is kind of what feels to be the epicenter of commercial real estate in North America some days. How is the real estate market in New York? Obviously, we read office buildings are empty and you read all the headlines and stuff like that. But really, for someone like yourself, who's on top of the heap in your industry, but still has boots on the ground, what is happening in the New York City real estate market, commercial-wise?
Yeah, it is definitely a challenging market. The interest rate increases that have happened so quickly and to such a large magnitude have created a lot of issues in the marketplace. Fundamentals are moving all over. We have through the first 3 quarters of this year, the market's on pace to be down about 52% in terms of dollar volume of sales and down 37% in terms of the number of properties sold, from last year. And those numbers will be down both in the 70s relative to the peak of the cycle. So it to go to 40,000 feet, and just to give you some history on how we've progressed or degressed, I guess, if that's a word. The peak of the market cycle here clearly was in 2014 and 2015. In 2014, we had 5,534 buildings sell in New York City. That was an all-time record by more than 10%. And then in 2015, we had 80.1 billion of sales volume, which was also an all-time record. We noticed that the market really started to correct in October of 2015. And from October of 2015 through February of 2020, the volume of sales, dollar volume, had dropped 56%. Number of properties sold dropped 54%. Value was only down about 12%. Then COVID came along in March of 2020, converted this mostly volume correction into a value correction. Value bottomed out in 2020. There was an inflection point at the beginning of April of 2021 where all the residential property reports came out showing that there was upward pressure on residential rents for the first time in years. Condo sale absorption was very positive. And all of a sudden, there were 13 private equity firms that called me within a 3-day period saying, hey, we want to get back into the market. We've been on the sidelines. Who's building? Who's buying? Who can we invest with? And the market really picked up, and we were coming out of this. The second half of 21 and the first half of 2022 were really good. I thought we were out of the correction, but then the Federal Reserve started raising interest rates in March. It started to tangibly impact the real estate market in August or September of 22, and that started to exert downward pressure on pricing. And we're either in the second phase of a big long correction that started in October of 15, or we're in a second correction now that started in the second half of 2022. But times are challenging, and refinance risk is a huge issue for the market because it's nearly impossible to get the same financing proceeds that you got previously, with rates being so much higher today than they were before. So it's a challenging market. We're still making deals. It hasn't gone to zero, but every transaction is very, very challenging. You have to work twice as hard, and that's just symptomatic of what happens when you get into this part of the cycle.
Wow. That's obviously, high level information from someone in your shoes that has seen this cycle or cycles probably in your time. Where do you think we go from here? Like, obviously, I mean, we're coming out of, interest rates, obviously, up here at least, we're up about 800% since January 2022, where the Bank of Canada's BOC rate right now is about sitting at 5 with it. So it kind of pushes a lot of our Schedule 1 banks up here, prime rate to probably 7.5, give or take with it. Where do things go from here? Obviously, I want to say interest rates probably can't get any worse. Hopefully not. If interest rates start coming down, do you foresee a waterfall cascade effect of money on the sidelines coming back into it, where people have just been looking for sort of, forecasting rates, or not so much banking on them going down too fast, but now I know where we peaked. If I can pencil now, it's only going to get better. What happens over the next 2 years?
Yeah, Cory, I think that, when you go through any cycle, what happens is when something happens in the market to exert downward pressure on value, you have a period of stagnation where value falls, comparable sale value deviates from real value. And what I mean by that is that, most folks are in tune with the fact that real value is down. If they are trying to buy properties, they're offering real value. People who are not in tune with that may be offering yesterday's price, and the sellers who can get yesterday's price transact. So comp sale value looks like it's going up, but most of the market knows that's not the real value anymore. And so transaction volumes drop. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. And then you get into this period where the new reality has to set in, and sellers have to get acclimated to the new reality. And then what you need to clear the market out is you need to enter what we call the capitulation phase, where sellers who have pent-up demand to sell, or non-discretionary sellers, have to move. And even some discretionary sellers say, hey, it's not going to get better anytime soon. I have to pull the trigger. And then you start to see transaction volume pick up. That's what we need. We need pricing to reset. In a number of sectors, pricing is resetting. It needs to stabilize. Once we have that stabilization and you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, lenders will start to feel more comfortable. Lenders feeling more comfortable will make spreads compress. Spreads compress will make borrowing less expensive. And then that hopefully starts a positive feedback loop within the market. I think one of the interesting things we've seen is that in this correction, that is very, very different from prior corrections. And I lived through the S&L crisis in the early 90s, the recession in the early 2000s, the GFC. In those corrections, every product type was moving in the same direction. It was just a matter of to what extent value was going to go down. Today, different product types are performing differently. And, right now we have a bright spot in the hotel market. Our retail market here has been battered for years and years and years. It seems like that has stabilized. Rents have stopped going down. Leasing activities picking up. Investor interest is back. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have the office sector, which most people feel, and it is important to caveat the office sector by saying that new construction Class A office is doing relatively well. But the Class B and C office, most people believe that it's going to be at least another 2 or 3 years before there's some stabilization in that sector.
So right now, what would a vacancy rate be to say just on the office market in New York? To give you the context here in Vancouver pre-pandemic, and we're not a head office city by any stretch of the imagination, and a lot of our land downtown is absorbed by condo developments more so than office developments. We had a very unhealthy, depending on what report you read, we were probably around like 2.5 to 3.5% vacancy rate, which was just super unhealthy for tenants coming in. Landlords could pretty much put a blank check out there and someone would sign it for them just because the rents were going up at such staggering paces. Fast forward to today, vacancy rates are probably, depending on if you want to include subleases or not, probably, between 10 and 12% and climbing with it. Where's New York at right now?
Well, New York's at 18%, according to
Okay.
published reports. And that 18%, depending on every company produces a different report in terms of what the size of the market is. At the low end, it's 400 million feet. At the high end, it's 500 million feet. So at 18% vacancy, you have, 80, 90 million feet of empty office space.
Wow.
And again, it's important to differentiate between that new construction Class A, which, again, doing relatively well. But the older office stock, the B and C, smaller, low service buildings, mid-block, not such great light and air. Vacancy is probably 40 or 50% in those buildings.
Is there an opportunity right now for, say, Class B office tenants to move into Class A at a relatively competitive price than maybe where it was, pre-pandemic?
Not really. If you look at true Class A space in that new construction, a couple of years old, those rents are triple digits all over, and
Wow.
landlords are getting those rents. So, if you look at a typical Class B or C building here, you may be in the $50 to $60 a foot range. Tertiary buildings now are, in the 30 to 40 range. So you can't go from, if you're a tenant paying $60 a foot, you can't go pay $150 a foot in rent. You just can't afford to do it.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
It's something where, there has to be a low cost provider because every tenant can't pay triple digit rents. Class A new construction is going to find its tenants, but we just have such an overhang of vacant space that we really need incentives to do one of two things. One, convert the office space to some alternative use. We have a very, very dire situation with our supply of housing, and we need new housing desperately. So housing would be a logical conversion. But the value of these B and C office buildings are getting so low that they're almost trading at land value, even if you add in the cost to demolish the building. So I think if things keep going the way they are, at the end of this cycle, we might look back and see that there were more buildings demolished than converted. But there is definitely an overhang of space, and that's something that we need to deal with.
What do you think the future of office looks like? Is it a hybrid model? Do we maybe go back to what we had, pre-pandemic, where employers want people in the office every day? Or is it flight to quality type of thing for buildings, where buildings have to offer more amenities so tenants can then offer those to their staff in order to get them to come in? What does the office market look like in the future, you think?
Yeah, look, I think a couple of fundamental things that I think about work are number one, to, particularly with young people, to have folks have their learning curve be relatively steep. You have to be in the ecosystem of an office. I think that you could be in a meeting or on a Zoom, you deal with the topic being discussed, and that's all you deal with, and then you sign off and leave the meeting. But I think you could be getting a cup of coffee at the coffee machine, or you could be passing somebody in the hall, or even just washing your hands in the bathroom, overhearing a conversation that will be thought-provoking or may give you insight into something. So I think you learn as a young person. I think you learn almost by osmosis, just by being in the office environment. And so I think for the benefit of young people, and I think young people are the ones who probably have been hurt the most by this work from home thing. Their learning curves have been relatively flat, which is not good. And then also for corporate culture, you want people to interact together. You know, you want to work with people you like. It's hard to like somebody if you never see them. So you know, you want to be around them. So I think for those two reasons, I think people will get back to using office space in the more traditional sense. I think that companies might be a little bit more judicious about who they have in the office. You know, maybe you don't need your researchers in the office, or maybe you don't need your graphics people in the office, but maybe a certain percentage of your workforce could work effectively from home. But, you know, for the most part, I think you want the folks who need to be working in a team environment, you want them to be around each other.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. We talk about on the show all the time about what that office space looks like. I think just from an employer standpoint, or retention standpoint of staff, you got to collaborate. You got to create corporate culture in order to maintain everybody. Because I think it'd be awkward going to the Christmas party and meeting everyone for the first time that you've only talked through video all year. And I think it's hard to probably express the same collaboration efforts through video that you can in person.
Right. No, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Bob, you talked about retail there a little bit. I mean, from a standpoint, what does prime retail in downtown New York City go for? You talked about office spaces, triple digits, which is probably more than double what our prime stuff goes for up here. Maybe some stuff is like, $60 to $70 a foot for the really, really good stuff. There's obviously a lot of incentives to get to those numbers right now. What does prime retail look like in downtown New York if I'm a tenant from a price perspective?
Right. Well, I would say if you look at the really prime corridors of Fifth Avenue in the Plaza District and Madison Avenue in the 60s and 70s, retail rents can be over $1,000 a foot.
Wow.
And that's not unusual. We had a retail condo at 737 Madison Avenue that Chanel bought, and they paid $30,000 a square foot for their retail condo. So at the high end of the market, it can get up there. But I think retail rents today are significantly below where they were at their peak, and but they have stabilized, and that stabilization is what's leading to a lot more leasing volume, and is what has brought back the investor demand, which is so great to see. We about 4 months ago, I got a call from an investor who said, "Hey, Bob, what retail properties do you have for sale?" And I almost fell off my chair. I was so surprised to get that question, because it's been years since anyone asked me that. But I think it's indicative of what's happening within that sector, which has been very positive.
For investors that are looking in the marketplace, and obviously it's big budget investors in the New York City market, I would think, what type of cap rate or yield can these investors expect if I'm looking at, say, like a good retail building? What type of yield can I look at that for, say, maybe today? And maybe give me an example pre-pandemic, or where they were, if they're higher or lower at that time.
Yeah, well, retail cap rates bounce around very significantly. And I think there are so many factors that affect what the cap rate would be. Is the rent still a legacy rent that is way over market? Is it below market? Cap rate is really indicative of what the upside potential of the property is. So today, I think cap rates, if you look at all asset classes, you're gonna use as an anchor what your borrowing rate is, and then you may be slightly above that or slightly below that, depending on the unique idiosyncrasies of any particular building. So, today borrowing rates, let's call it on average, 7%. For some asset classes, you may be able to get down in the low sixes or high fives. Some asset classes are in the eights. So it depends, again, on the deal. The asset class is very difficult to generalize, and I don't want to generalize, but I'd say you're probably within some kind of collar around the borrowing rate.
Gotcha. All this being said, where does Bob Knakal put his money? If you had the funds needed to make an investment today, what asset class are you investing in?
Yeah, well, what I'm telling people, Cory, I think that one of the sectors that is really, really undervalued and I think has tremendous upside is the land sector in New York. And I say that, again, the benefit of having been around for a long time. If we look at the very best land sites in Manhattan. And one of the best things about the Manhattan market is that it is an as of right zoning jurisdiction. So you don't have to go through an entitlement process. You know exactly what kind of building you can build, how big a building you can build, what shape that building can have. And so if you look at the best land sites in Manhattan over time, the peak of every successive cycle has greatly exceeded the prior peak until now. So I'll take you back to 1986, 87. The best land sites in Manhattan were selling for $125 per buildable foot. By 97, 98, that got to $350. 06, 07 got to $750. 2015, 16 got to $1,100.
Wow.
And then during 2020, that got down into the 300s. By early 22, it was up to about 500 again. And now, because of the interest rate increases, there's downward pressure being exerted on that sector again. But I believe that at the peak of the next cycle, you'll see the best land in New York City selling at $1,300, $1,400 per buildable foot. And if I had $1 billion to deploy, I would buy land, sit on it, demolish the building, sit on the land, wait for the peak of the next cycle, and then probably 2x, 3x, 4x my money.
So I'm going to ask you here if you can take out your crystal ball, and we kind of touched base a little bit on this as we've kind of gone here. If we fast forward a year from now and maybe out to 5 years from now, how does the commercial real estate sector look in New York? Have we recovered? Are we ahead of pace? Where are we going? How does the future look?
Yeah, 5 years from now, I'd say I think we will have recovered, and I think that that recovery will be very, very strong. When the market bounces back, I expect it to bounce back significantly. So I think it'll be interesting to see what things look like. But I think the more interesting thing, because of what we're going through now and this tremendous reset in value that we're going through, I think the interesting thing would be 20 years or 25 years from today to look at the skyline of the city of New York and compare it to what you have today. I think it's going to look like a vastly different city, mainly because there is such demand for new. If you look at the Upper East Side, it has historically been a very stable and valuable neighborhood, particularly west of 3rd Avenue. So 5th Avenue to 3rd Avenue, just east of Central Park. There are many new condo buildings that have been built in that area. And a lot of the buyers, everybody thinks, the foreign buyers come in and they buy all these condos. Well, the reality is that a big sector of that buying pool has been folks moving out of older pre-war co-op buildings into brand new condo buildings. And in the same way that the new construction office sector is doing so well, because people want new space. They want floor-to-ceiling windows. They want no columns. And new construction offers that. And I think with values getting as low as they are, I think that you are going to see a tremendous boom in the construction business here. And I think the skyline 20 years from now, 25 years from now is going to look remarkably different than it looks today.
That's a great point. Well, I wish I had billions to follow suit there with you, because I think, obviously we follow the New York real estate market like probably a lot of people do in our industry, just because, like I said, it is kind of feels like the epicenter here in North America there. But I was really surprised to hear the values had come off as much as they had. But it's like up here in Vancouver, they haven't made any more land. We're constrained, similar to probably New York in a lot of ways. That as long as immigration keeps coming and all that stuff, I'm a big believer land values are going to continue to propel upwards, cycle after cycle. More and more people come in, they got somewhere they got to live.
Yep, absolutely.
Before we let you go here, we have a 6-pack of lighthearted questions we ask all of our guests. We kind of get to know you a little bit more outside of the office. Do you have just a couple more minutes for us?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Cory.
The 6-pack is powered by our good friends over at Red Point Law.
Red Point Law, Cory, Tim, Falco, Scott, and the team. These are great people with a wealth of experience when it comes to commercial closings and private lending. And I just want to say, Cory, not to cut you off, they have a perfect 5-star review on Google.
So for all your commercial legal needs, visit them at redpointlaw.ca, with offices in Vancouver and now open in downtown Kelowna. All right, first one up, Bob. When you find the time, favorite vacation spot?
Oh, absolutely, positively, the Cayman Islands.
Oh, great choice. Great choice. Do you get over there very often?
One of the most beautiful beaches in the world, 7 Mile Beach, and I've been going to Grand Cayman since the mid '80s, and
Wow.
absolutely love it down there.
Excellent choice. Excellent choice. Next question up. A book recommendation you'd have for our listeners. Doesn't necessarily have to be real estate, though.
No, I would read the trio of books by Dr. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. 10X is easier than 2X.
Yeah,
Who, not
yeah.
how, and The Gap in the Game. I mean, brilliant, brilliant stuff. It's more about life lessons. Also, am a big lover of smooth jazz. And so, I love Joe Sample and David Benoit and Dave Koz and David Sanborn and those guys. So kind of an eclectic mix of music. And then also, I love classical as well. Vivaldi's Four Seasons I could listen to on a revolving loop all day long. So very eclectic musical taste.
All great choices. All great choices. So it's Friday night. The week is done. You've had a couple beverages. Someone gives you a karaoke mic. What song are you singing, Bob?
Oh, gosh. Cory, I have to tell you, I've never done karaoke, and probably all the folks around me are thankful that's never happened. But, I've never done karaoke, and I couldn't even imagine what song I would sing.
That's fair. Last question up here, Bob, before we let you go. And this is kind of us as Canadians, we're hockey fans here. Do the New York Rangers win the Stanley Cup this year?
You know what? So far, it was a huge disappointment last year. They played so great. They beat Jersey 2 games in a row in Jersey to start that series, and they wilted like a flower in the heat. But they're off to a great start this year. I tell you, they're young. They have some good veteran leadership, but there are a lot of great teams out there. And so I love hockey. I've been a Rangers season ticket holder since 1984. And I have 3 seats. I go to most games with my wife and my 14-year-old daughter, who's a giant hockey fan and, in fact, plays hockey. But
awesome.
Will the Rangers win the Cup this year? As a lifelong diehard Ranger fan, I have to say, Cory, without a doubt, absolutely positively, the Rangers will win the Cup this year. How's that?
So being a season ticket holder that long, is it fair to say that you saw the Rangers beat the Canucks in the Stanley Cup final in 94?
I was not in the building for that particular game, but I absolutely watched it. And I have to tell you, I will admit, I had tears rolling down my cheeks when the Rangers were skating around the Garden Ice with the Cup. Well,
traditionally up here in Vancouver, we have tears rolling down our cheeks about the second week of March because our team's off golfing by that point. But this year we seem like we're not as bad. We've probably been the best golfers for the past 10 years, I feel like. So hopefully this is the year that we squeak our way into the playoffs come hell or high water. We'll see what happens.
Well, I wish you the best of luck.
we need it up here most years. Bob, how can our guests find out more about what you're doing at JLL and all of that stuff down there?
Yeah, sure. Well, I invite everybody, follow me on social media. I'm on, I think, just about every social media platform. So look for me. And also, if you'd like to email me, please feel free to email me at bob.knakal@jll.com. That's bob.knakal@jll.com. I have a great reading list. I mentioned 3 of the books that I love. I have about 20 books on a reading list that I'm happy to share with folks. Which I think are great, to talk about the things that are so important for people within the real estate industry, namely psychology, persuasion, human behavior, why people do what they do, selling, great books that I think have helped me tremendously, and I think would help you also. If anyone would like a copy of that reading list, you can drop me an email and I'm happy to get it out to you. And, always happy to hear from folks.
Well, Bob, thank you so much for doing this. We appreciate it. Like I said, we're very excited to have you on here and to dig more into the commercial real estate realm in New York City.
Fantastic, Cory. It was a pleasure being with you today.
There you have it, folks. Our interview with Bob Knakal of JLL in New York City. What a great interview. Lots of takeaways. Amazing to hear just the cycles he's been through, what he's seen happen. And I was really, really surprised to hear about the price per buildable of Manhattan development sites. And although they are high, how much they kind of came off. And when we look in Vancouver, obviously, our market here is still very, very expensive. But when he talks about the triple digit office lease rates, when he talks about the $1,000 price per foot retail lease rates and the $30,000 per foot acquisition by Chanel, I hate to say it, as expensive as our market is, we don't really hold a candle to what people in New York are paying. And I think when you look at Vancouver's office market, and there's rates that are probably up in that $50, $60, $70 a foot range. When he talks about Class A period is in the triple digits, that's a big jump. That means everyone, or mostly everyone, in some of these larger glass enclosed AAA office buildings are paying over $100 a foot, and then they've got triple net costs on top of that. So it's a far stretch from what we see here, and obviously right now we are experiencing higher vacancy rate. Landlords having to be much more incentives in the deal. On the commercial real estate side of the office sector there, we still are far behind some of these international markets. And I think when people look in Vancouver as an example, they also, international buyers, and these could be very large corporations or REITs or institutions. They're looking at Vancouver, they're looking at New York, they're probably looking at LA, maybe Atlanta. They're looking into the state of Texas now. They're probably looking at London. So, when you kind of compare us to that metric there, we aren't nearly as expensive as you might find in New York. Obviously, the population is completely different, but nevertheless, we definitely don't hold a candle to what they're seeing over there from a price per foot metric in various asset classes. There. We'll leave it there for today because a great episode. We probably run a little bit long with Bob because we're very, very pleased to have him here. But if you are looking to get into the commercial real estate realm, feel free to reach out to us anytime. You can drop me an email, Cory@williamwright.ca. Always love hearing from our listeners about the show and talking commercial real estate in general. You can call our Vancouver office anytime, 604-428-5255. Let us know what asset class you're looking for anywhere in the province. We'll put you in touch with the broker that can help you there. As well as you can visit our website, williamwright.ca, to sign up for the latest and greatest news. Also, make sure you visit vancouverrealestatepodcast.com. All the episodes live there, both on the residential side and the commercial side. Opportunity to go back over the holidays there, go back and listen to some great episodes, get caught back up, because I think we have a busy 2024 ahead of us. And we look forward to coming next week, guys, with another great guest. Thanks so much for listening. Take care.
Subscribe today.